This is the Crucible, the JRTC Experience.
Scouts out. They on. Sappers up.
Hey, click to my position over.
Countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark. EV downrange.
Clear, tip jumpers.
Sir, the initial assessment is...
This is If I Would Have Only Known, a candid conversation with leaders. In this series, we discuss Brigade Combat Team warfighting skills and lessons learned in a decisive action training environment for large-scale combat operations at JRTC.
Hey, Colonel Matt Hardman, Commander of Operations Group. Thanks for joining us again. We've got him back. Devil 6, the infamous Colonel Teddy Kleisner, just got done beating the dreaded Tarikans here in Arnland, JRTC rotation. His second rotation as a brigade commander, and awesome having you back.
Great being here.
Yeah, different weather than last time you were here.
Completely different circumstances, for
Yeah.
sure. I remember, I think everyone has this feeling when you jump and you're on Geronimo drop zone and you just got done packing up your chute. The next thing that crosses your mind isn't, where's my assembly area? It's, man, 14 days is a long time. So here we are on the 15th day.
Yeah. And so it's a good place to start. So we were able to do an airborne assault with the brigade, and a bunch of air lands, including air landing a mech tank team from Rock of the Marne. This rotation had everything. We had tanks, we had Japanese ground self-defense force,
Right.
we had Dutch air assault company.
Yeah, it was. I don't think we could have packed anything else into the task org. It was a robust task org, and to enter into the box through using the 82nd Airborne Division's JFE Playbook was pretty interesting, right? Trying to figure out how we're going to PVL all that in over time, right? When do you want the JGSDF? You know, the Japanese company was a strong, potent company, and we wanted them early, but that's a lot of lift. So the conversation we had last time about the PVL, like it all came back to that. Like, when do you want them in? You know, the Dutch were a different problem to solve because they're paratroopers, right? So getting them in is a lot easier, and they didn't have that much. But the JGSDF was huge, and they brought a lot to the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then obviously getting the mech tank team in, Team Kronos.
That's right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. We knew that was going to be tough, right? One C-17 per M1. But the sweet spot was, but if you don't get him here in time to defend, then what's the point of bringing him, right? Yeah. We knew that we could incorporate them into the defense. Incorporating them into the offense was going to be a lot harder. So we made sure that the PVL kind of kept that into account.
Yeah. So we did an airborne assault. Secured the airhead line, transitioned to a defense, transitioned out of the defense into an attack, based on conditions with friendly forces and enemy, transition into a hasty defense, and then some limited counterattack.
I like to describe it the other way around. We airborne assaulted into a transition, and then we defended into a transition so we could attack into another transition, right? Because like that is where we continue to learn, right? You mentioned it, the second time here, second time being frustrated by similar issues. I think we did better in the transitions in some respects, but they're just so tough, right? Anyone can attack, anyone can defend. I really believe that, but it's really hard to transition.
Yeah.
I think the open phasing system, the construct that you have now, it makes it harder, but it should make it harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were talking earlier. I did 2 rotations as a battalion commander, and now 2 as a brigade commander. I've never slept less than in this rotation. I think the open phasing was part of that, right? Because if you're really not accounting for these transitions and budgeting the division of labor in your command group in the sleep, like you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
We learned that the hard way on the first transition for sure.
Well, so we'll unpack some of this. Up front, like for everybody out there watching in the universe, this is a great rotation. A lot of great fights at the platoon company level. Aggregated some of those into battalion wins. Aggregated some of the battalion wins into some brigade wins. It's designed to hurt, right?
Yeah.
And we delivered.
That's right.
But not for a lack of real excellence. And I think this, unpacking some of that, and you and I have talked about this in the past. I mean, the evolution of this place, particularly in the last few years, to focus on large scale combat operations.
Right.
I came in with a view of really trying to make stark risk and opportunity for commanders in decision making.
Yeah.
And then, an emphasis, from lots of leaders right now in the Army of exactly what you described. This, how do we fight through these transitions?
Yeah.
And a lot going on in our Army from a modernization standpoint. FM30. New FM30 out. Division is a principal tactical formation going forward.
Yeah.
And fighting the brigade is part of a tactical construct. We got to give a shout out to Andy Kaiser, Task Force Mountain Warrior.
That's right. On my left flank the whole time.
On left flank the whole time from Fort Carson.
That's right. I'm near daily dialogues, kind of understanding what he was going through and what we were going through and how they would impact each other. And then Task Force Ace on our right flank providing fires to us was a pretty interesting add too.
Yeah.
And our fires team was actually able to make that happen. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. I don't want to say a first because we tend to do that a lot at the CTCs, but definitely a noticeable doing a constructive brigade providing virtual fires to a live brigade in the dirt to include a full technical rehearsal with those fires. I thought was pretty neat.
Yeah, it was. So what I remember last time is the interaction with sister brigades in the division occurred a lot in the targeting meetings, or I think it was the targeting board to the division commander. And now it's taking place in the commander's update briefs. And so now the dialogue between commanders actually makes more sense. And it's easier to kind of see where you nest in a bigger division construct, and when it's appropriate to ask for assets and support and when it's not.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking back to one of the update briefs we did, and you're hearing about like what's happening adjacent. And I could tell in your voice like you wanted resources, but you knew you weren't in a place to ask, given like where everybody else
I think
was.
the one thing that every commander's waiting on is like, which one of these sister commanders is going to report that he got hit with chem, right? Because then you're like, oh, here we go. It's going to start any day now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure that you have the phone number so you can dial in Colonel Kleisner Task Force Mountain Warriors rotation that'll be here in January. Mm-hmm. Which should be a lot of fun. You'll have to do like a guest call to Andy. Not often that we're able to get a brigade commander gets to come twice, right? And a number of your leaders got to come twice. So it was significant turnover in the brigade, but you had a number that got to come back here and do it again. And not often that we get to do it on or about a year, a little bit more, but pretty close to a year removed, which I think gives like real opportunities for an organization to kind of see itself and grow. Where are the areas you think the Devil Brigade made the most growth in the last 15 months?
Communications is number one. Nothing else is even close. We came back from the last rotation. It was a humbling rotation. But one of the first things that we all concurred with was if we do anything between now and whatever's next, we will get our commo straight. And I was fearful that we were going to say that and forget that. And we kind of did. But as we transitioned into the IRF2, which in the 82nd Airborne Division is the intensive training cycle, we had done just enough commexing to kind of get started on the right foot. And we, you know, with the ITN and the legacy systems, I feel like we got to where I almost always could grab a hand mic and talk to almost all the commanders on a voice system, which
was not the experience I had in my rotation.
And it was the opposite of my last one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was unbelievably frustrating. Commanders that can't talk, it's like you've tied their hands behind their backs. But commanders that can talk, like commanders can talk, they can do anything.
Yeah.
Right? You can athlete your way to success if you can communicate. You don't stand a chance if you can't. So we made a lot of headway there. And unlike a lot of my normal technique is to sort of like roll my sleeves up and get in to the weeds and help carry, through the solution. And in this case, it was like just straight up blunt force and trauma. Like S6, we better be able to communicate. The only thing I probably did myself is a couple of COMEXs where I made sure that the commanders were in the COMEXs running the COMEX. But I just sort of said like, hey, this is the expectation. And though the fortune you have as a brigade commander is you've got staff primaries that aren't doing this for the first time.
Yeah.
So you can give that blunt force and trauma guidance and just say, hey, Devil 2A, you know the expectation, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I was hazing the guy, but he got it done. He
had a smile on his face.
He's an excellent officer.
Yeah, great officer.
Yeah. Delete that out of the podcast because he and I have a bet going.
And your point is different at the battalion level. Like, grassroots communication with a lot of first-time folks.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, and honestly, you have a fairly seasoned Brigade S4, Brigade S1, Brigade S6, you name it, right? They can all sort of work across the battalion enterprise as sort of this feudal system or this pickup game of enterprise leaders. The way that communications is working these days, especially with ITN, is the S6 enterprise has to be a monarchy. The S6 has to centralize and drive that enterprise. It's not like the way maybe the 4s can sort of, or the airs, they're all part of this pool of talent that gets things done. Like if combo doesn't start from the top and it's not centralized, it will be problematic.
Yeah, I mean, I actually tend to think in a lot of the warfighting functions, as we focus on LISCO, that's just a difficult changed reality of,
you're right.
You got to drive
add the
things.
division context to this. And
I mean, we're going there with command posts, right? Like, so, for the dismounted assault command posts, the brigade, the battalions, all fighting off the same products, the same tools, the same structure, really being driven by the division.
Yep.
Which, not to take anything away from the rest of the rotation of the command posts, from my perspective, that was the most successful C2 portion. Ironically, I mean, dismounted, under ponchos, really, really effective. Clearly had practiced that a lot.
Our TAC, what we have to continue to learn in attack is why is it going out? And how does that drive who goes? And how does that drive how long it stays out? Because the IT in the TAC is not the problem anymore. We're back to figuring out the human side of this. Yeah. Who's in it and for what? In our TAC's combo now is as capable as our main command post. We just can't plan and we can't run 24-hour ops.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
No, and I mean, going out and looking at the battalions, I was very jealous. At the capabilities, at the battalion level. And I mean, I think, many of us anticipated now the transition is, we've got some better communications equipment. Now we got to catch up on the form part of this and the function from a human being perspective versus the technical part.
Let me ask you a question, because what we did that was new this time is we knew that after the JFE, we wanted to occupy the urban area, establish command posts in Déboisé, which apparently is the right way to say that.
If you have any class.
That's right. So at one point there were 5 command posts. So an infantry battalion, the engineer battalion, the artillery battalion, the BSB, and the main command post for the brigade were all in buildings in Déboisé. we wanted to do that because we were inspired by some of the TTPs that Ukrainians are using for survivability purposes. We found that, working in the structures, like the TOC floor the feng shui may not be perfect, but we love the protection of it. What we did not like is like the massing of vehicles in the urban area and the way that signature was hard to hide. But like, what did the ops group, like what is y'all's assessment of that? Because I'm not sure we can call it success or failure. It was an experiment.
I think, a learning experience. So, I mean, I think as we continue to evolve the operational environment here at JRTC, which has always been this way, right? We're constantly changing the operational environment, going forward. I think right now, the way it's structured, it's really hard to operate command posts in an urban environment in a way that I think you can truly achieve that degree of concealment as well as protection. I think we have work to do on the ops group side to doing that. I think units will continue to learn how they can reduce their signature going forward. And I think that's something that clearly we're interested in doing. I mean, this idea of the transparency of the battlefield, whether it's UAS or electromagnetic signature and all these things, we're going to figure it out. I think it's great. I mean, the 82nd comes down here and tries stuff. In a disciplined way. I mean, not, I think ultimately y'all are going to be better for it. We've got a lot of lessons learned out of it that we'll kind of analyze, process, and then feed back out into the force.
The vehicles are the vulnerability, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And, there's the vehicle signature, at least for UAS, is the most obvious. Mm-hmm. And it's, there's been some, and we provided your team some of that feedback of what that looks like from overhead imagery and things like that. And I think we got to educate. We got to help people see what they really look like, when a UAS is flying overhead, and are you really concealed? And it's funny. I think a lot of times, like, we're concealed from a ground scout, but we're not concealed from overhead, or we're concealed from overhead, but we're not concealed from ground. And I think this is just education as our force continues to transition from Iraq, Afghanistan experience.
Hey, speaking of concealment, if I could, so we have the TCN lights now, huge improvement over the old TCN systems. But it's the commercial off-the-shelf transport that we used the entire time. Yeah. And the bandwidth was huge, and it's a non-military signature. The TCN lights, and I only throw this out there because most of our contemporaries are operating off of TCN lights, and they're fairly new to the force. The routers on it and the generator on it are huge, but the transport on it would have crippled us if we'd have used it. We never turned it on. Once we left, we turned it on to test systems with division, but we never used the antenna. It was interesting. We're making leaps forward with a lot of commercial transport right now in the 82nd Airborne Division. I think it's the way we're going. Yeah,
and I mean, I know, there's a lot of folks across the enterprise that are really interested in what we're doing, and I think it's just, this is part of the modernization effort of, okay, where do we really want to be in 5 years? Where do we need to be in a year?
Right.
And I think there'll be trade-offs. People above us will make decisions based on risk, and a whole host of different kinds of risk. And I don't think it'll be the same for every formation, at least for the near term.
Right.
Until we sort of sort through some of this. But it's an exciting time to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And opportunities abound for improvement. Hey, so improvements. What, from your perspective, what was RSOI like for your team last April? Because I got views on this one. I mean, how did you feel RSOI went last rotation?
Yeah, inbound RSO and I. Yeah. This will be another communications conversation. So, running railhead and running through the paces of, your logistics network, sort of getting everyone set, I probably was comparable last time. the stark difference is this time we paid out of pocket for a box truck to bring in the most critical communications equipment so that we could immediately start mating our systems with the division's communications backbone. Last time, the most critical communications equipment was on a truck that got stuck somewhere.
That's not awesome.
No, no, and that was a huge contributor to a lot of our concerns. So, to me, what really unlocked our potential to create our own luck was two things. One is we got the combo stuff on the ground early and got it all set. The second is we started from a playbook. Our first operation, the JFE, you know, in the 82nd Airborne Division, we have a playbook for these ops, and the orders it's all but written because of that. And so we just started off on the right foot, which created a lot of luck for us in the first several days of the ops.
No, I mean, I think that the command emphasis on communication, like how we did that, whether it's, you know, getting the right equipment in with the right people at the right time, ultimately those are command decisions. That set the tone for the reception staging, onward integration of the brigade.
Yeah.
And, you know, you and I've talked a lot about this before. I mean, that's how you all made your own luck. You know, I got the opportunity to see you before you came back, you know, over at Bragg, and you could tell the team, just even as you were preparing and executing outload, it was an operation. And then so that translates, we get here and it's an operation.
Right.
And those become habits that we carry forward.
Right.
In the DNA of the 82nd Airborne Division, just because of the Global Response Force mission. But that's something that, you know, I hope that folks, you know, that guest OCT here, that kind of see this, like that mindset is a huge part of, I think, being successful, whether you're deploying to a CTC or whether you're deploying into theater. Yeah. Right.
So the DNA thing came up another time in the rotation, in the air assault. So we have this sort of mindset or this belief that, hey, if you can run green ramp and get to load time for an airborne operation, like, you know how to organize people. You know how to take a mass of people that aren't yours and get it going. So we think like, okay, so like we can run PC posture.
Morgan Freeman voice. In fact, they could not run PC posture. That's not true.
Well, but you know, the night of the big air assault, it was painful.
Yeah. Let me jump in though for a sec. So one of the things I did appreciate, and I think like why we were able to end up doing it, and you know, this is something that you and we wanted to talk about later in this conversation, was you came to me early in RSOI and said, hey, I think this is a thing that we're not well practiced in and going to need help in.
Yeah.
And so between the Task Force Wolfpack, the Aviation Task Force, and then the Ops Group team, we're able to have the right people in the right place to help coach that.
Yeah, and that's
versus like just observing failure.
Yeah, and that's what's cool is, you know, with the Ops Group, like, you know, as a commander, you know, like, hey, I can ask the Ops Group to sort of like, we're not going to ask you to be in charge and spoon feed, but we're going to tell you like, hey, partner, this is going to be rough.
So like, if you're a company commander listening, like, just tell us what you're struggling with so we can help you, right? Because that's what we get paid to do.
Right. Yeah, you did.
Right.
Yeah.
And no, it was good. It was definitely exciting, but safe.
Yeah.
And you know, well, okay. And then what happened? We got to do it again when we went up to peace.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so like it was night and day.
Right.
It was a small air assault when we were in the live fire phase, but we were way more engaged as a leader, and I was in position for that air assault. I was out of position for the one that mattered most, actually. And this just comes with reps and training and understanding.
Yeah. I thought, I mean, PZ operations in the second one were a lot smoother, leader, you know. But that's right. Like, you wouldn't take, commanded in 10th Mountain Division, you wouldn't take a 10th Mountain Brigade and say, hey, you know, you've done some air assaults. Why don't you go do an airborne assault?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. No, it's, you know, the RSOI, I mean, haven't seen a lot of RSOIs between here and NTC. I thought it was really, really good RSOI, approach, especially having, getting to integrate a tank company, Japanese contingent,
Right.
Dutch contingent.
Yeah.
Which is, it's just harder. And so, but it was a lot of fun to watch. All right. So, hey, for folks listening, we did our big after action review yesterday. Colonel Kleisner and I spent like 4 hours prepping for this thing in 2 separate conversations, and it was a ton of fun. And we focused the after action review really on decision making.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things,
Right.
when we talked before the rotation, you were really interested. So do you want to elaborate on sort of?
Well, the bottom of your slides, it says right here, right? America's Leadership Laboratory, right? So let's talk about the things
By the way, I like to think of them as our slides.
That's right. That's right. So we are the Leadership Laboratory.
We are the
right. So what happens in the box that is just pure leadership, right? Purpose, direction, motivation, absolutely. But like the hardest things that are happening out there at any given time and all the time are the decisions that are getting made. Some of them are no-brainers, but everyone in the brigade who's a commander, and even many that are not, they're walking around North Fort right now, mentally drained from decision fatigue. I mean, it is nonstop. And so I thought, a lot of people have different opinions on the IS feed, but I put a lot of value in it. And at least it's a great talking piece, right? Because every commander out there has those 3 or 4 decisions that were the epic decisions of the rotation. And what we wanted to do is coax those out. The IS feed helped kind of feed the conversation, but let's talk about how we make decisions at the moment that the decisions have to be made. Because what the CG had a great point about, don't let the results drive the conversation. Rewind to the moment the decision got made. What did you know at that moment? What was reasonably knowable and perhaps not known to you? And how did you as a commander make that decision intuitively by yourself? Or how did you make it analytically by incorporating your staff? And so that's what we unpacked and really got the conversation going on. Because I think that's, like you said, I've been to a few of these CTC rotations, and we've discussed the slides that talk about whether or not the log stat got in on time, and there's an important conversation going on there. But when you start pulling apart how commanders make decisions and how their staffs and subordinates are or are not a part of the decision process, you're really getting into the essence of the leadership that's happening here in the laboratory.
Yeah, and I think that's a higher level conversation that's got to be informed really by an acknowledgement that the foundational things matter.
Right.
Right. The log stat, if we can't acknowledge that the log stat's important, then we probably can't put ourselves in a position to have a higher conversation about how do we make decisions.
That's right. Yeah.
And, I think the other one, the platoons and squads fought really well. Mm-hmm. Really, really well. So then we're not talking about, frankly, a lot of noise. We are, get these.
Right. That's the
really,
goal.
Yeah.
That's the goal, is to show up at the JRTC with a unit that is prepared to perform in a way that in the AARs you're having the conversations that you really want to have. No one wants to come here and walk away and be like, we never really talked about fighting.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about the battle rhythm when we talked about MDMP, but no one ever talked about why did you go left when you could have gone right? That battle was awesome, except you went left. But now we're having these conversations.
Yeah. We got to be in a place that the reason that we succeed or fail is off decision making, not off inability to execute very fundamental things.
For want of some basic stuff,
yeah.
You were doomed already, right?
Yeah. Before you stepped off, we knew this was going to be
right.
Yeah. And no, I thought it was really good. I thought we had a really good conversation about what condition setting really is, and the decision making behind that condition setting, particularly when it got to the science behind getting suppression and obscuration in the fight, and then commanders making the decision of whether or not that's been effective.
Yeah.
And reflecting on that conversation yesterday was, you know, the understanding that, okay, if we're making that decision at the company level or at the battalion level, as we saw, it's going to have massive impact to the brigade.
Right. Yeah. All the, you know, and this is why I'm a huge fan. You know, maybe it took until brigade command to really, really get it. Multi-echelon training, right? Everyone should train in an environment that exposes to them how your decisions and actions scale up in a good way or a bad way. Because when you take a company and say, we're going to do company exevals, this is an example, and we say, we're going to put you in isolation where here's your attack lane, here's your movement to contact lane, and here's your defense lane, right? And it's just, the company is an island unto itself, right? You don't get that. But in multi-echelon training, you see how you get this prism effect where it was just, you know, a minor oversight at the company level, but it had determinate impacts on brigade level ops.
Well, and we can flip that too, right? Like, you know, this brigade thing, by the way, is pretty hard if you're not tracking.
Yep.
And that will have downstream effects to companies.
Right.
Like the reality is at the company
That's
level,
even,
you're going to have to solve problems.
That's even the
for
better
the
point, right? Because it's
brigade.
not, yeah, the story isn't how companies, batteries, and troops
Victimize the
back.
brigade.
Yeah. It's the opposite, right?
Yeah.
You know, like, well, you know, the war game could have put out that really refined target list worksheet, but is that really a big deal? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's huge, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's, you do see, I mean, you know, a big part of this, you know, came back in this fight was, you know, companies doing fundamentals well, making good decisions, either leading up and influencing their higher headquarters with the bottom-up refinement, or really fighting well to put the battalion and the brigade in a position to close holes in the swing of the battalion and brigade level. And then the inverse of that is where the brigade and the battalions put companies in a position where, you know, we're really stacking the deck in their favor to be successful.
Right. Yeah.
I thought the dialogue yesterday showed both of those. Mm-hmm. You know, successes and challenges, up and down. And I'm with you in the multi-echelon. I mean, this is where we learn how to fight, you know, with our decisions having impacts.
That's right.
To adjacent units and higher headquarters.
Yeah, and leaders have to come to the table ready to bear all with their decision making, and be totally cool. Just like, you know what, I missed it, boss, right? And it's easier said than done, I think.
Yeah.
But you know, people will get into the habit if it's always in your AARs and in your training, people will have fun dissecting that when they know that they're in a safe place to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
that's what commanders have to do, is create that vibe.
Well, yeah. I mean, I thought yesterday that, you know, the first vignette you let out with, hey, I made this decision. It probably wasn't the right decision, and it was probably a little bit late, and this is the impact it had. And it really opened the door for everybody to talk.
Yeah. This goes back to that podcast we were talking about.
Yeah.
Right. The Annie Duke, the famous gambler podcast, I think it's called Getting Better by Being Wrong, right?
Yeah.
You know, one of the great quotes in that, it's something like, we all have to come from a place of that our thoughts and beliefs, and I'd say for us tactically, are always under construction. Right? And you don't come to the table to have a conversation about your bad beat story about how bad luck is the reason you lost, or the reason you won is because you're so good. Right? You have to be willing to get inside the decisions that you're making and unpack them and find ways to improve them. And that comes from a place of humility, but it comes from a place where the organization's like saying, hey, you're in this safe spot here. Where like, if you're not secure enough to talk about these things with humility, then that's actually an indictment on you.
Well, I mean, you know, something Joan Gardner said yesterday, right? Like the team that wins, but really wins with a bunch of flaws and is unable to see the flaws. It's like, it's usually dangerous.
The easy win that was never analyzed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, you know, we talked a lot. I mean, Joel Leneve talked about it. You know, you talk about winning. I mean, you got to win bad enough that you're like, don't want to hear about any of the good things that happened. You just want to focus on all the bad things that happened. Like even when you won.
Right.
And I thought, yesterday in the AR, I mean, that was certainly the case. Like we had a bunch of successes, but that's not where you spent your time.
Right. I mean, what is our profession's version of studying tape?
Yeah.
Right. I think this came up in our last podcast, but like, to a degree here, it's the IS feed. But no matter the case, it's always the AAR, right? The AAR is how the military studies tape. Like you have to immerse yourself in the awesomeness of that. I think it's fun.
I think it's that was probably my favorite part of the rotation was just going through prepping for this AR.
Yeah, I wonder if your staff was like, it's 22.
Yeah, they weren't as excited.
It's 2,200.
No, but to your point, I mean, I talk about this with OCTs. I mean, I think the two things that OCTs have to come with that maybe aren't intuitive. Like the intuitive is, okay, you have to be doctrinally sound.
Yeah.
But the unintuitive is the first one is I think you got to come with tremendous amount of empathy. Mm-hmm. Right? Like this is like if you're looking at like your counterpart and not empathetic to like, man, this is like hard.
Right.
Right. And this dude's having a rough day and that, he did everything right and it still didn't go well. Mm-hmm. Right. Or he did everything for the right reasons and tried really hard and it still didn't turn out. If you can't be empathetic to that, it's really, I think, hard to coach. And then I think the other is like humility because like for the grace of God, there go I. And like, I look at, I learned a lot this rotation. There was just things that you look at and like, wow, I hadn't thought about that way. Or, okay, I got away with that one when I was a brigade commander.
Right.
Or, man, he's struggling with that and I struggle with that and I still don't have like the answer for how to get there on some of this stuff.
Right.
Because I think the simple things are hard here.
Exactly.
Like rest cycles.
Yeah. Well, and they all scale up, right? They aggregate.
Yeah.
Right. That's what's tough, right? And we talk about Lieutenant Colonel Strand's great line about, there's the space. You've defended, you're transitioned, you're on the offense, but there's this easting out there, right, that you have to get to before you feel pretty confident that you're going to get to objective Subaru, right? And he calls that the sketch zone. Or like,
in the sketch.
Wading into the sketch, right? That's, to me, that's that and the transitions that lead into and out of the sketch are really the source of anxiety for me at the JRTC. It's so tough. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the open phasing, but like Geronimo just, the mode of, I mean, because he gets to do it every month.
Yeah.
He has a good feel for those transitions. And he maintains contact, but not enough enough contact for him to understand what you're doing, but not enough contact for you to understand what he's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, he intentionally tries to keep you at bay enough to give him room and space.
Right.
To do what he wants to do.
That's right. And you'd think that like a unit that's 5 times his size, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's 4 times his size, right? Should be the one dictating the terms. But, we get so cumbersome in our transitions that ironically that's not the case, right? And that's why I want to come back for a third time, right? I mean, no one wants to be miserable for 14 days and sleepless, but like what I haven't seen in my 2 rotations at the brigade level is audacity, right? We've had some good fights and we've made some good calls, but seizing and retaining the initiative seems to be something that the G-Man's always just really good at.
Yeah, listen, I thought when you all attacking the Subaru, the COFMs were off. Mm-hmm. I thought the decision to transition into a hasty defense was pretty gutsy. A lot of people wouldn't do that. A lot of people would try and go, some folks would try and go through the motions like, well, they expect me to attack, so I'm going to attack.
Right.
I thought you guys transitioned in all in. I mean, we had obstacles up within a couple hours. Defensive fighting positions were resyncing fires.
The transition was an example of leaders in all the right places doing all the right things. A unit whose training and expertise and talent just created the luck. The decision to transition into the defense could be interpreted as a bold decision, but the reason I don't chalk it up in my head is because that decision was forced on me, or I forced it on myself, right? We culminated. But we were able to turn that into, you're going to culminate me? I'm going to culminate you.
Well, I mean, I think, Sergeant Major Hissong, I mean, Oscar 9 talks about this, and All-American 7, who was the COG here before me, it's like units that come here to like watch their units train, units that come here to train their units, or commanders that come here to train their units, commanders that come here to win. Mm-hmm. Like that decision was like commander coming here to win. Like, mm-hmm. Okay, hey, I don't like being in the position I'm in right now, but I'm going to.
This is how we're going to turn it around.
Right.
Right. And we did. That felt good. Yeah.
We transitioned the defense to enable us to get back on the offense.
Yeah. In fact, the enemy's attack against our defense pulled so much out of Sagasite that we went in there unopposed, kind of like Sun Tzu would have us do.
Yeah.
That was all Andy Harris. That wasn't it.
Yeah. No, it's good, and I think that's organizations that learn faster in combat are the ones that are going to win, mm-hmm. and definitely the Devil Brigade is an organization that learns faster in combat. Ton of fun having you here, and
likewise,
and learning
great team
with you and beside you.
Teamwork between our teams for sure.
All right, look forward to seeing you back here again.
Yeah. What does that mean? Thanks, man. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on The Crucible, the JRTC Experience.
The Joint Readiness Training Center is the premier Crucible training experience. We prepare units to fight and win in the most complex environments against world-class opposing forces. We are America's leadership laboratory. Again, we'd like to thank our guests for participating. This podcast was created and produced by Mr. John Mabes. It was recorded and edited by Chief Thomas Rich and researched by First Lieutenant Anthony Cho. Intro vocals were done by Mr. Robert Chopper. Special thanks to Captain Jermaine Branch and Mr. Jeff England from Public Affairs. Be sure to like and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest warfighting TTPs learned through the Crucible that is the Joint Readiness Training Center. Follow us by going to https://linktr.ee/JRTC. We'd like to thank our partners at the Center for Army Lessons Learned of the Combined Arms Center, especially the JRTC COL Observations Detachment. Be sure to follow them on social media as well. Follow them at https://www.army.mil/CALL. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review us wherever you listen or watch your podcasts, and be sure to stay tuned for more in the near future. The Crucible, the JRTC Experience, is a product of the Joint Readiness Training Center.